Hi everybody, welcome to this fourth and final video of lesson 4 on modern existentialism. It's not the last video I'm making, only the last one on this lesson on the crowd. And I want to finish this lesson addressing two very important issues. The first one having to do with individual and collective responsibility. Okay, we're going to understand the dynamic between these two things and the boundaries between these two. Most importantly, in addressing this first issue, I'm going to offer a solution, let's say. I'm going to tell you how to avoid being a victim of the crowd and how to keep the crowd in its proper domain and what that domain is. So it's going to be a pretty helpful video, I'm sure, in fully understanding this relationship we have with communities, okay? All right. So the second topic I want to address has to do with social media. And boy, we're going to talk about social media, right? In our world right now, social media it's huge. It's very very important and influential. And there's a lot of the crowd in social media. And some of you might already see that, right? So let's begin with the first one of these issues, topics, individual and collective responsibility. And we're going to start with a quote from this book. Okay, again, Selfless. I think it's the third time I've been using this book in my videos, and it's just funny how much I disagree with what this man says in the book. Like it's just unbelievable. If you pick up my copy of Selfless, you'll see in almost every single page my comments on the margins of the pages, and you can almost feel my aggravation, reading those comments, right, and objections. And yet, many, if not most of the things that he says in this book, they have a point. Okay, they have some validity, and I want to show you what I mean with this quote right here. So, according to Mr. Brian Lowry, when you are part of a group, their pain is your pain. Their shame is your shame. Their guilt is your guilt. I hope you see what I mean. Like when I read this the first time, I was like, what in the world? Why should I be held responsible for something that I probably have nothing to do with? Simply because others found the community that supposedly I belong, and somebody found some guilt, some flaw or problem or corruption in the community, and therefore I'm guilty simply because I'm I'm seen as a member of this community. So I'm guilty by association. Man, that's not cool. Taking the blame for something you haven't done, and what's worse, uh, suffering the consequences for it. Okay. When I was putting together, my notes for this last video, I the first example that popped into my head was something that happened in Chile, in the country where I was born in South America. A, a sad historical period in Chile, I have to say. In the 1960s, I would say late 1960s, Salvador Allende was elected president, democratically, president of Chile. Okay, that was quite an event because for the first time in history, a communist leader was voted democratically president of a country. Like he did not become president or leader or dictator by some other means, like a revolution or something like it happened in Cuba, right? And even in Russia, he was democratically elected president, despite the fact that he was open about his communist views, and he openly said that he wanted to implement some sort of communist system in Chile. Okay, fine. He had most people on board with that idea, and yet about 3 years into his presidency, things were going really, really, really bad in the country economically, and there was unemployment was a huge issue, and inflation and scarcity. Basic items, were not available, like milk and bread. I mean, it was a mess. So obviously, people were quite dissatisfied with the government, and all of a sudden, this man rose to power. This military general, Augusto Pinochet. Okay, he overthrew the government of Allende and he installed himself as a dictator. And he was a dictator of Chile for many years. Now, one of the very first things that Pinochet did was to systematically persecute everyone who was in any way associated with the Communist Party of Chile. Okay? And as a consequence, millions of Chileans had to flee the country, right? Because, I mean, after all, the majority voted for this man, for this communist president, Salvador Allende. But here's the thing. Even if you had nothing to do with the way the government was run, the communist government, even if you were just a regular person, right, like a mechanic or a store clerk, and it didn't matter if you were found to be affiliated, or if it was found out that you voted for this communist president, okay, you were in deep trouble. You had to flee the country because you run the risk of being imprisoned, tortured, and even killed. So you were found guilty by association. Once again, even if you had nothing to do with the chaos that was going on with the economy, you had nothing to do with that, simply because you voted, or because you were probably affiliated to the Communist Party in some way, right? On paper, okay, you were guilty. So these people had to leave the country. Okay, that's not right, but that's what Mr. Lowry is saying here. So he has a point, right? But it's not right, though. So, so this is something very important to keep in mind about the dangers, the risks of being part of a community. Okay, I say community in quotes, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But let us first be clear about the huge disadvantages of being a member of a community or a group. Number one, you can be found guilty by association, right? If the community is seen to be doing something corrupt, then you are a corrupt individual. You are to blame, and you are to suffer the consequences, even if you had nothing to do with the corruption or the flaw, the mistake, or whatever. The group's guilt is your guilt, and their shame is your shame. Wow, okay, that's not good. The other thing, the other big negative about groups and communities, we talked about in the previous video. Groups, communities, they don't have your best interest in mind. They don't. If for whatever reason you're moving up, you're improving your condition, and your improvement represents some sort of damage or threat to the rest of the community, then you're in trouble. The community is not going to have your back. They're not going to celebrate your whatever, your improvement, your achievements. They will not, most likely. I'm sure there are exceptions, good groups and communities that they have, each member's back. Okay, maybe there's some of that, some of those communities out there. But do you remember that example from the previous video, and an example from this book? The National Association of the Deaf in America. Remember that example? This organization that supposedly represents, right, the community of deaf people in America. Well, this organization was openly against this device that it was proven that helped improve the quality of life and of hearing in people who are deaf. And the organization was totally against it. because they saw it as a threat, right, to the existence of the community of deaf people and the association. So they did not care about actual practical benefits and about quality of life in their so-called members. They didn't care. No. Yeah, that's good for each member, but it's not good for us. Therefore, we have to, whatever, we have to oppose it. Okay, so once again, you don't want to be held responsible for something you haven't done, something that the community is guilty of. And number two, communities don't always have your best interest in mind. There are, though, more formal forms of associations and communities. I don't know if you call them communities, but organizations. Like, I'm thinking, okay, for example, the benefits of belonging to a union. Okay. The teachers union in the United States is a pretty big union. I think it's the biggest one. And sort of the give and takes. Okay, that's pretty clear from the start. Like, if you're a teacher and you want to become a member of the union, okay, well, the benefits, right? Your employer will not be able to just fire you or because the whole union is going to back you up, right? And that's kind of good. So you have some benefits, but you also have to pay a fee, right? A monthly fee, maybe a percentage of your paycheck, right? Goes to the union. Okay. So once again, the gives and takes in these cases, in these types of organizations is pretty clear. But for other types of groups and communities, like the community of deaf people in America, I mean, really, what are the benefits and what are the sacrifices that each member is required or supposed to do? I mean, it's hard to tell, and I'm going to tell you why. And this is my answer to the issue of the crowd. This so-called communities, I said before, so-called, they don't really exist. If you think about it, these communities, like all these communities people talk about, the African American community, the Hispanic community, the LGBTQ plus community, the scientific community, those things don't exist. They don't. For example, um, okay, I'm Hispanic, right? And I'm an immigrant in the United States. Therefore, I'm part of the Hispanic immigrant community in the United States. I, I hope you're not thinking that I'm being funny here or I'm kidding. People talk about these communities all the time in the media, like the Hispanic community, immigrant community, right? Well, I'm supposed to be part of a community, a very specific one, right? The Hispanic immigrant community. Okay. Well, here's the reality. I don't see any community. When I go out and I meet people who are Hispanics, immigrants, I mean, I recognize the background, but I don't see him as, oh, that's my people, that's my brother or my sister, because, we're members of the same tribe. I don't see these people that way. I don't. I just see people with, we just have something in common, background in common. And that's the heart of the matter, friends. What people, these communities are nothing but a group of people or groups of people you share something in common with. That's it. But that's no community. Normally, you share an interest in common, you share a background like skin color or place of origin, or you share an experience in common, right? So simply because, you meet someone or there's a group of people out there you share something in common with, so will that make immediately that a community and you a member of this community? Okay, for me, friends, and I hope you see it too, that is a total fiction. It's a total fiction. What are the responsibilities, right, of this belonging to the community of Hispanic immigrants when I don't even see a community in the first place? So, just to illustrate how absurd this idea is, okay, one of the most talked about communities is the LGBTQ plus community, right? They talk about this community probably uh, more than any other one. And okay, think about what it is. It's simply people who are not heterosexual in the traditional sense, right? That's all there is. That's what they share in common. And of course, there's a diversity between this, in this LGBTQ plus community, and every letter represents one of those different aspects, right? Or subgroups. Okay, but if not being heterosexual in the traditional sense means that you're part of this community, okay, then by logical deduction, being heterosexual, it's a community. Okay, if you share that in common with other people, then okay, then you are a member of a community, the community of heterosexual people. Now, ask yourself this: if you're watching and you're heterosexual, right? When you go out and you meet other heterosexual people, do you feel like related? Like, oh yeah, that's my man, my tribe. Yeah, we're part of something. We're part of the same. Do you feel that sort of, I don't know, a sense of brotherhood? I mean, I think it's ridiculous. Like just going out and meeting a couple, right? Let's say a man and a woman just walking, holding hands. Do you see him and you go like, oh, that's my people, that's my community? That is absurd. I don't think anyone does that or feels that way about heterosexual people. And by logical extension, I don't think African Americans see other African Americans, just random African Americans out there that they come across. I don't think they see them as, oh, brothers and sisters. Yeah, we are one community. That's what others want you to believe, especially politicians, because it's so convenient for politicians, right, to group people this way, put people into groups and call them communities. But there's not such a thing as a community. Because here's the thing about communities, friends. Here's another actual problem about communities. This idea of being a member of a community can only limit you. That's it. It limits your potential, your actions, your possibilities of becoming probably who you would like to become. And Mr. Lowry, in the previous video, I used another quote from this book, and he says, he's an African American, right? And we've read this in the previous video. He says that being an African American, he has to be mindful of guarding the boundaries of what it means to be an African American. Like he does not want to push those boundaries because if he does, then the whole identity of the African American community will be compromised. And therefore his identity will be compromised as a consequence because he's an African American. So he has to be very careful. He does not want that. Mr. Lowry in this book believes, I said this also in a previous video, I think in lesson 1, he believes that we don't have a self. We don't have a unique individual self, which is why when you look at the subtitle of this book, it says the social creation of you in quotes, because that does not really exist, according to Mr. Lowry. There's no such thing as an individual. All you are is a collection of different selves, a collection of different social identities. He says If you're an African American, you're part of that community. If you are a parent, you're part of that community. If you are a professional, you're part of a community of professionals. And if you're an educator, so you belong, your identity is diluted into so many or fragmented into so many different identities, social identities. And that's who you really are. Just a collection of social identities. Well, that is absolutely wrong. And it's wrong because it limits you. It means, friends, that there are things that you're not supposed to do as an African American, right? If you're African American, okay, he's saying don't push the boundaries of what it means to be an African American. What does that even mean? That there are things that you're not supposed to do as an African American, and there are things that you are supposed to do, things you are supposed to say, things you are not supposed to say. Because if you push those boundaries, if you do something you're not supposed to do as an African American, then wow, you will not be an African American anymore. Do you see how absurd this idea is? Like do you think sometimes I stop and think, oh, I would like to do this, but I can't because I'm an Hispanic immigrant in the United States. And Hispanic immigrants in the United States are not supposed to do that. I hope it's clear, friends. It's both absurd, this idea of communities, and it only limits you. Guess what? When you're an individual, when you see yourself as an individual, and that's who you are, you're limitless. Your potential is limitless. You can do anything you want. There are no rules, there are no things that you're not supposed to do, there are no challenges high enough for you or inappropriate for you. No. You're limitless in your potential. Tell me if that's not much more preferable than being a member of a community and identify yourself with the community. So I am first and foremost an individual. There's nothing that I'm not supposed to do according to other people, according to the crowd. Because, friends, um, that's what the crowd is, a set of expectations and beliefs that you must comply to. Okay, well, if that's what it means to be part of a community, then I don't want to be part of any community. Why? Because I don't believe in the idea of communities in the first place. I am a person, I am an individual. Now, does that mean that modern existentialism is a self-centered, selfish philosophy? Not at all. Not at all. Responsibility, and here we're going to talk about individual responsibility. Responsibility, it's a huge part of modern existentialism because it's obvious, it's part of your nature. Whatever aligns with your values, whatever call, whatever need, cause that aligns with your value, okay, that means there are some responsibilities to take up that you must assume. There are responsibilities out there. So, to give you an example, okay, well, being an immigrant and being Hispanic, right? Especially being an immigrant in the United States. That means that I share this experience with millions of people in the United States who are immigrants. Once again, that's not community. But I share that experience with millions of people. I realized many years ago that it's incredibly I discovered that it's incredibly rewarding for me to help immigrants in what capacity? In teaching them ESL. One day I found, this was years ago, I took up this part-time job teaching ESL. Okay, for those of you who don't know, ESL stands for English as a Second Language, which basically means teaching English to immigrants who don't speak English. So I I started teaching years ago ESL, and I found it so absolutely rewarding because I could identify myself with my students, with their needs. Being an immigrant in the United States, friends, it's very, very, very difficult, and not being able to communicate, right? That's probably the major obstacle of an immigrant in the United States. But there are other challenges like not knowing the system, not knowing the laws, not being aware of opportunities out there for you, and wow, missing your family, the people you left behind in your country of origin. That's tough, man. And I'm all too familiar with that suffering, that struggle. So when I started teaching ESL, I realized, man, this is so cool. I can help these people. I can alleviate their struggle a little bit. I can put tools in their hands. I can put information, knowledge, encouragement, which immigrants, oh man, they really need encouragement. Somebody to tell them, hey, I believe in you. You can do this. You got this. Putting in their hands skills, speaking skills, and so on. And because I was there, I suffered from the same uh, struggles. So one day, when I when I when I started thinking, right, analyzing, why is this job so great? When I started teaching ESL, and I realized, okay, that this is something that it's very important for me. It's something that aligns with my values, my personal values. So something that I do aligns with my values. Obviously, it's extremely meaningful and rewarding. So so it's not something that I do because it's my responsibility, my collective responsibility, because I owe it to the community of immigrants. No, I owe it to myself. I help these people, and I still do. I'm a full-time philosophy professor, but in the summer especially, I love taking ESL classes because I love to help immigrants in this capacity, and even as a non in a non educator role. When I meet people and I make friends who are immigrants, I always help them. I give them encouragement. I give them advice. Whatever I can do, I do. I help them. People who know me, they know that this is true. And I'm not saying this, friends, to say, oh, how great I am. What a great person I am. No. I'm simply trying to make a very important point here. I don't owe it to the community of immigrants in America. I owe it to myself. This is something that it's meaningful and important to me as an individual. Therefore, I set the terms for the responsibility that I take. I set the terms. I realized this is meaningful, this is important to me, this is something that I must do. Besides, it's rewarding, it's meaningful. So man, it's a win-win. Okay, so and the same thing for you, friends. You are going to encounter, you're going to be in circumstances in which you're going to recognize a need, and it's going to feel like a huge burden on your shoulders. Okay, and okay, then you have to do the analysis. Why you're feeling so strongly about this particular need? Let's say, just to use an example, let's say you started volunteering to help elderly people. Okay, in the fall, helping people raking their leaves in the backyard, in front yard, and you realize that this is something so important to do something for the elderly, and everybody else who was there volunteering with you and helping raking leaves with you, obviously they didn't feel the same way about this, but for you it was incredibly meaningful, and it was necessary that you had to do something. You felt like that need, that burden of responsibility. My friends, that's a good thing. That is You identifying a need that you can meet and that it's particularly personally valuable and meaningful to you. Okay, do the analysis. Ask yourself why you're feeling this way. Talk to other people. Try to get at the bottom of it. Why is this so important? Is there a path for you to follow, maybe professionally, just doing something for this, for the elderly? This is not a community, right? Doing something for these people, the elderly. Okay, maybe that's your calling. Maybe that's what you should do. Actually, this is funny because my next lesson on modern existentialism has to do exactly with what I'm talking about. Finding your calling, right? Your mission in life. So we'll explore this topic, right? This issue more in depth. But what I'm trying to say here, friends, is no such thing as collective responsibility. Don't believe in that for a second. That's nonsense, and that can only limit you and harm you. Being held responsible for something you haven't done, but the community did. Community you're supposedly be part of. Don't believe in that for a second. You're an individual like me. So there are Hispanics, immigrants in the United States who commit crimes, for example. Do you think I feel any responsibility for that? Zero. I feel zero responsibility. I have nothing to do with those people, really nothing. That's not my community. That's not my tribe. Says who? The crowd, right? Well, I know how to put the crowd in its proper place, and that place is I don't believe in communities. Don't put me in a box. Don't put me in a community that I don't even believe it exists, simply to comply with your demands and your expectations. Okay, by you, I'm speaking to the crowd, okay? So the crowd that I said this before, the crowd that maybe you can embody at some point, or you have. Okay, I'm not gonna go back to that topic. We talked about in the first video of this lesson, but that's how you put the crowd in its proper place. No, I don't believe that. No, I'm not responsible for what other Hispanics are doing. I'm not responsible for what other African Americans are doing. I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible for what other white people are doing. If you're white, right, that's your race. And, there turned out to be, right, like the famous George Floyd case, right? A police officer, white person who pretty much, yeah, killed this man, right? This African American man. Okay, so what does that mean? Are you going to be ashamed? You're going to feel ashamed for being white? And if you're a police officer, wow, you feel so terribly guilty for something that you haven't done? No. No, 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 no. That's no community. The community of police officers, that's not a community. The white community, that's not a community. I'm an individual. I share a lot of things in common with other people. And in my particular case, I got to say, honestly, I feel more in common with a regular American than with a Hispanic immigrant in the United States. Like truly. Like I feel I have a lot more in common, that I have more to say, more to talk about with a regular American, and I can have a much meaningful conversation. Um, that's just the way it is. So simply because I share something of my background in common with other people, okay, no community. That's just almost like gosh, like football fans, right? Fans who cheer for the same team and they go to the stadium to watch their favorite team, and they put on the jersey and everything. And like, is that a community? Of course not. That's a group of people you share an interest with. So, friends, don't fall for that trap. There are no communities. Those are fictions. Fictions that other people find convenient to use, put you in this box, and stereotyping you, really. So, and we all know how wrong this is, being stereotyped. So, let me just to wrap up, right? To sum up this first topic. Communities or groups, they can be pretty toxic. Number one, when you are held responsible for something you haven't done, like this idea right here. The guilt of the group is your guilt. Nah, no. Number two, which is really, really interesting, and I totally missed this point because this flow of responsibility does not go in the other direction, in the opposite direction. Okay, what Mr. Lowry here is saying doesn't work the other way. Like your shame, your mistakes are the mistakes of the group. Okay, how about that idea? Whatever you do that is wrong, okay, then you're not only to blame, but the whole community, the whole group you belong to, it's to blame for your mistakes. How about that idea? It doesn't work that way actually. Um, think about a music band, okay? A music band. Okay, let's say you're a keyboard player in a music band, and you're an awful keyboard player, and you always make mistakes. You're learning how to play the keyboard. It's true when you're performing. If you make mistake, it's true. People watching your performance, they're not going to just blame you. They're not going to hear your keyboard playing and they're going to go like, oh, the keyboard player is awful. No, what most people are going to do, they're going to judge the whole band, right? Oh, this band is awful. It sounds terrible. Even if it's just one member, right, of the band making all the mistakes. Okay, well, it seems to work in the other direction, yeah. The mistakes of one is the mistake of the whole group. Yes, but what does the group do normally in those circumstances? They kick you out and replace you. That's what they do. Yeah, because if you as a member of the group, you're making the group look bad, they're going to kick you out. And obviously that's what always happens, right? In sports it's the same way. In any sport team, if there is a team member who is just underperforming and continuously, okay, and is making the whole team lose, well, most likely they're going to kick out that person and they're going to replace him or her with someone who can perform better. So it's not like the group is going to say, yeah, okay, yeah, the group, we take the whole blame for the mistake of one of our members, one of our team players. Sometimes they might do it, sometimes. But if you, as a member of this group, keep making the same mistakes, friends, you can be pretty sure they're gonna kick you out. They're gonna push you away, right? That's what they're gonna do. So, but it's funny because we cannot do the same when we believe we're part of a group and the group is found guilty of something, and we cannot just uh, distance ourselves from this guilt. Normally, we can't. We can't do that. So best thing to do, friends, is just don't believe in this idea of groups and communities. And say it openly. I say it openly. I don't believe in communities. I don't think those things exist. That is just a fiction, and it's an idea that only limits individuals. And I don't believe in that. I believe individuals should be all they can be, and you should feel empowered, not limited. So in that sense, I feel sorry for Mr. Lowry. Despite the fact of being I guess a notable professional, because at least he has written this book, right? And he's a professor somewhere, I think in California. So he has his accomplishments, right? But who knows, man? Maybe he really struggles with finding meaning in life because he does not know who he is. So, okay, friends, let's address the second topic, social media. Roman philosopher Lucius Annaeus Seneca once wrote, "The many speak highly of you, but have you really any grounds for satisfaction with yourself if you are the kind of person the many understand?" In other words, if you are the kind of person who agrees with the majority, or the majority agrees with you in everything you say, okay, for Seneca, that's suspicious. Okay, that's not something you should be pleased about, um, regarding yourself. Oh yeah, my views are so great. Everybody agrees with me, right? Seneca would again look at that with suspicion. Why? Okay, for two reasons. Okay, the first one, let's call it the existential reason, as we learned here in these videos. The existential reason is that when when you speak and you act in a way in which the majority or everybody find it appropriate, that means that your words and actions are sustained by values that belong to the collective, to the majority. And when that's the case, when your values are those of the majority, that means that you have no values. Therefore, you don't know who you are. I said this many, many times in the past, and I think I made my case. When you don't have personal values, you don't know yourself. If your values are those of the majority, if whatever you think it's right, it's what the majority thinks is right, and when you whatever you think it's wrong is what the majority think it's wrong, well, I'm sorry to say it, right? But you have no actual values. You have no personal values, and therefore you don't know who you are. So that's the first suspicion, right? Someone like that is suspicious of not really knowing who they are. And the other reason, the other suspicion, let's say, uh, also comes from an existential philosopher, from Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard once wrote, "You know you are lying when you're speaking to the crowd." I think it was something like that. I read it years ago. I couldn't find the quote. I got to be honest. But it was something like that. You know you're lying when you're speaking to the crowd. That's when you know you're most insincere. Um, and this relates to social media, I think, in a very clear way, because this is the topic that I want to address, right? Social media. You might be wondering, I thought we were talking about social media here. Now we got Seneca, like an ancient Roman thinker. Um, well, the point about using these quotes, right, in these philosophers, it's not because they were like existential philosophers, right, in an appropriate sense of the term. It's because the stuff they said was real. And existentialism is about real things. It's about being genuine. So there's something not genuine about a person with whom most people agree with. So and those are the two suspicions, right? Number one, if whatever you say everybody agree with, okay, you probably don't know who you are, right? Number one. And number two, you're probably being insincere. Most likely, Kierkegaard would be more radical and say you're absolutely lying. And again, social media. I mean, it's true. And we're going to talk about ways people use and approach social media. But one thing that it's pretty common and everybody knows, and when you start, let's say you're not new to social media, this is one of the first things you're going to discover once you begin, right, having some sort of social media presence, whatever that means. When you start using social media, you're going to learn pretty quickly that what people post about themselves, it's not their true selves. Okay, it's not necessarily that people are lying. Everybody lies on social media. No, that's not really the case, the point. But when people share stuff in social media, they share only the positive stuff, right? They only, like, they're taking pictures on they're having a great weekend somewhere at the beach or something. They take great pictures, or in a restaurant, fancy restaurant or fancy place, right? And they take pictures and they share it on social media, just to sort of let everybody know, let all their friends know, they're having a great time. And you learn pretty quickly that people often use this social media to portray themselves in a way that they're really not. When you know the person posting, you know the person personally, right? You know about their life and in detail, you know immediately, like, the person, it's not really that person he or she is trying to advertise through social media. You know the person is struggling, maybe the person is very unhappy with her life, her marriage, his children, whatever, his job. But everything they post about their lives is just so great. Everybody would think, oh man, this person is just having a great life. He's having a great time all the time. He's just posting just great stuff, right? He's doing great, amazing things. And we learn that quickly, that there's some dishonesty, right, in the picture that these people are trying to sell us about themselves. And we were like, okay. I mean, it's true that we use social media and to, let's not say advertise, but let's say to share our achievements, right, and our good times. We achieved something important, and we want to share it with the people we care about, right? And so you might think, okay, there's nothing dishonest about doing that, and it's true. When my youngest girl was born, and I mean that was probably the first thing I did, right? The very first picture I took of her, I immediately shared them in my not social media, but in my with my family members, right? Because I get it, you're happy and you want to share your happiness with the rest of the world. But we don't do that. We don't have that attitude with our mistakes, right? when we mess up at work or at home, or our inadequacies, maybe we're just lazy when we're home, and maybe we were late for work and we got in trouble. We're not going to share any of that. So if we're only sharing just one aspect, not even 50%, just one aspect of our lives, the good times, that might not be even 20% of our lives. But if the 20% of our life that is great, that's the only stuff we share, and we don't get to see the other 80% of your time and your life, okay, then we're really not looking at a real person, right? This image we're getting, this idea we're getting of you, it's not real. And in a way, that's dishonest. You might think, well, but that's what people want to know, right? People want to know about the achievements and the happiness, the joy everybody is experiencing. No, not necessarily. So the thing is, we don't have the courage, and we don't see the point of sharing our flaws, right, with the rest of the world. So, anyways, so that's pretty clear about social media, and we learned that pretty early, as soon as we have a social media presence. Now, people use social media for four reasons, I would say, mostly four reasons. The first one is entertainment, right? People want to be entertained, right? They want to watch, funny videos and memes, and they want to have a good time, right? They want to relax, and during their break, they just want to watch something funny, and they want to have a little bit of a good time, right? With their phones and that kind of stuff. So entertainment, okay. The other reason, I said four reasons. The second reason, people want to be in touch with those they care about, friends, family, right? And like my example of me sharing my pictures of my newborn daughter, that kind of thing, right? You want to share your achievements, and you want to know what's going on in your best friend's life, and your family members, best and other friends, and that sort of thing. Okay, so you want to stay connected with the people you care about. That's the second reason. The third reason, people use social media to learn about the world. Now that's really concerning. Really, really concerning to me. Because it's true, so many people today use social media with that idea to be informed. They get their news from social media. Like, really? Wow. From the start, this media platforms do not depict the whole picture of anything, of a person or an event, because there are inherent interest in all this content that you are exposed to. And I'm going to speak more about that in a moment, but gosh, that to me that's really, really concerning. Once again, there's a lot of dishonesty on social media. Maybe the stuff you're watching is true. You're actually watching real events in a video, but remember, if all you get to see it's the good or the bad, you're not looking at the whole thing. So your evaluation of what you're learning is very, very low resolution, right? And very inadequate. So to me, that's really concerning. Uh, People have come up with some crazy ideas. Like in my classes, some of my students say that the most absurd things simply because they learn it in social media. So, okay, gosh, read books, friends, and I don't know what's the best way to learn about the world. Watch different media sources. If all this media outlets they're giving you the same news or they presented the events the same way, you have to watch something different, just so you have a more nuanced understanding of what's going on. Okay, so number one, people use social media to entertain themselves. Number two, to stay connected with the people they care about. Number three, to learn about the world. And number four, people use social media to share. To let me look at my notes for a moment. To to communicate to the world because they have something important to tell the world, right? So they want to be influencers, right? So they want to teach people stuff, lessons. You feel that you're here for a very important reason, and you feel like you have a very important mission in this planet, goal or cause you're pursuing, and you want to use social media as a medium, right, with which to um, make that change, bring about that change, right? You want to touch as many people as you can with your message. Well, here again, I would appeal to Kierkegaard's um, statement. You know you are lying when you're speaking to the crowd. You know you're being your most insincere when you're speaking to the crowd. So you might think, well, it's really not like that, but I would say most cases it's like that, friends. Um, so what is the social media crowd? Okay, because the crowd, as we defined it, is a set of expectations and beliefs of a particular community, group, organization, or whatever, particular set of beliefs and expectations that everyone who is part of that group or community must comply to. Okay, so now if we if all of us who use social media we're members, let's say, of this community, a virtual community, okay, if we're members of this virtual community, whatever you call it, it can be Facebook or Instagram, right, one of these platforms, um, what are the expectations to me? What expectations should I meet and conform? What set of beliefs I must conform to? Okay, two things. Two things. Social media expects from all of us, this social media crowd, expects from all of us to become two things. Two things. Number one, that we become um, addicted to content. That's it. That we're just continuously watching content on social media, post, memes, funny videos, advertisement. That's very important, right? Because we're constantly bombarded with advertisement, and many times, if not most of the time, political in nature. Okay? So we're being pushed, we're being fed this message, this political narrative constantly. So because someone is paying, and people pay, right? Corporations pay for this advertisement, and they do it for a reason. Corporations, political parties, right? This is one good way to convince people how to vote the right way. If maybe we can actually call that indoctrination. It's just indoctrination. You're being pushed a narrative. You're being given this view, political view of the world that is just very, very, very one-sided and therefore inadequate. Not real. But people in power, people with political power, they want you to vote for them, right? So they remain in power or they acquire more power. So, boy, social media, this crowd, the social media crowd, expect you to be just that person who is constantly watching and consuming content after content after content, and they want you to be there all day, all day. That's number one. That's what they expect from you and me. The other thing they expect is that we become some sort of um, uh, monster clown. Yes. Because think about it, social media rewards outrage. It does. Like anything you say that it's crazy, outrageous, or you do, or any video you make about something you're doing that is absolutely crazy, that's going to get a lot of views, right? And a lot of attention and a lot of likes. And you can capitalize, right, on those likes and views, right? You can become an influencer again and you can make some money. So the more outrageous you are, the more likely, the more likes you're going to get, the more views. So think about that, right? So this system, this social media platforms, they want you to be crazy, to post, to be provocative, right? Which is why uh, it's just so toxic. I mean, I pulled myself away from social media years ago, and I have a very limited social. I use very limited social media platforms. One of them it's LinkedIn, and the way I use it, it's because the um, the expectations are pretty clear. The you know the give and takes are pretty clear. I mean, people who use LinkedIn, they do it to advance their careers. So that's it. So that's their goal. They're pretty clear about that goal. No one really wants to share about their achievements, and they don't want to post funny memes and videos. They just want to grow a network of connections and relate to people, collaborate with others, and only to advance their professional career. So that's pretty clear. And I like that. And I use LinkedIn for the exact same purpose. The other one I use, but very extremely little, it's Instagram. And I started an Instagram account quite recently because, again, for many years, I had nothing, no Facebook, no Instagram, nothing, no Twitter. Ugh. Because again, because it rewards outrage and people, they're just so mean because they want to be provocative. They want to get likes. They want to get people's attention. So people say the craziest things, and the reality is this, friends. Most people in real life, they're not that crazy. They're not crazy at all. Of course, there are crazy people out there, but it's a very small segment of people, right? Sociopath. But what I'm talking about is that people who use social media, most people, they're not sociopath, but they act like sociopath. They do. They're mean, they're outrageous, provocative, but in a regular setting, go to a store, go to a restaurant, a classroom, go to the mall, and look at people around you. You might be surrounded by a lot of people. How do they act? Pretty decently, right? Everybody behaves, most people by far, they behave pretty decently. No one is doing outrageous things or saying crazy things. So, but again, social media rewards that. So you're being pushed to become this monster clown, someone you are not in real life. You're not that clown. So, and that's a problem, friends. It's a problem because Carl Rogers says, uh, and I shared this quote before, and in I think it was lesson one. Carl Rogers, the famous psychologist, with boy, this man had so many hours of clinical work and so much. He did so much research and had so much data in his hands. And this is one of his conclusions about the goal, right? About what people pursue, what people really want when they go to therapy and they have an issue. He writes, and I'm reading from On Becoming a Person. He says, it appears that the goal the individual most wishes to achieve, the end which he knowingly and unknowingly pursues, is to become himself. If there is something that we want as human beings, if there is something we truly, absolutely desire, knowingly or unknowingly, is to be ourselves, is to be genuine. We're not genuine in social media. Social media wants us to be the opposite of genuine, to be fake. And that's a problem because we've been living for the past, I would say for the past 8 years, an epidemic of depression that, friends, it's directly linked to social media use and abuse. And I mean the research has been done, and the correlation is pretty strong. The more you use social media, the more depressed you're going to be, or you are already. So that's almost like the most salient symptom of being depressed. If you meet someone or you know someone who is depressed, like seriously depressed, someone who needs therapy and someone who's probably taking medication for it, ask them or just pay attention to how much social media, how much time they spend on social media, on the virtual world, or watching Netflix, right? Which is not real because it's entertainment, right? And entertainment is not real. Movies we watch, right? That's not real. That's all act out, right? It's funny. It might be about real events, a movie we might be watching, right? And or serious, but what you're watching is not real. It's not. And the more you expose yourself to this content, the more you see all these stories, all these personas, right? That you see supposedly represent your friends, family, your connections, the more you gravitate into this orbit of lies, insincerity, and you're probably not aware of it, which is why I'm making this video. Might not be aware of it, but it's time to wake up, friends, because you are suffering. Because I absolutely agree with Rogers, because it's true. He did the research. I haven't. But I've lived long enough to know that that's what we really want as human beings. We want to be genuine. We want to be ourselves. We wish we had the courage to tell the whole world who we are, and tell them about our flaws, our mistakes, and everything else, the good things too. If you say no, you say no, 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 no. That's not what I want. I don't want people to know about my mistakes. Okay. Yeah, you don't, because you haven't settled who you are. You're not happy with who you are. So of course you don't want to tell the world about it. But you know what? When you accept yourself, you know yourself, you realize that you're just like everybody. Like everybody. Who does not make mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. So if you mess up, okay, guess what? Welcome. Welcome to humanity, right? The community of human beings. Um, Everybody does it. Everybody messes up. If you own it, and if you own it to the point where you're comfortable sharing it with the world, gosh, you got it. You're in the right path. You are in the right path. You're becoming an individual. That's not most people. Remember that? The illustration, everybody walking in one direction, the red guy walking in the opposite direction. It takes a lot of courage. But it's the right path, friends. So social media, it's not going to help, but it's going to produce the opposite effect in your life. It's not going to make your life easier, but harder. It's not going to help you finding yourself, but it's going to push you down and further down into this mud of uncertainty and ignorance and mediocrity. That's what social media does. All right, we're going to finish this video with, once again, our friend Soren Kierkegaard, who wrote something quite outrageous. Speaking of writing and expressing outrageous ideas, it's not like Kierkegaard would have been a great social media influencer in our times. He wrote quite a few outrageous things. He made some outrageous claims, and I'm gonna share one of them. But they have nothing to do with pleasing the crowd, but the opposite. Okay, you're gonna see what I mean in a moment. Here we go. Kierkegaard wrote, "Truth always rests with the minority, and the minority is always stronger than the majority." That's an idea. The minority is stronger because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion, while the strength of the majority is illusory, formed by the gangs who have no opinion. Now, there's a second part to this quote, but we have to make I have to make something very clear about what Kierkegaard meant by the truth. Okay, so for Kierkegaard, the truth is always something that it's existential in its nature. Meaning what? Meaning things that are beyond our ability to choose are not existential. an example, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Okay, that's a mathematical truth, right? Okay, so it doesn't matter how you behave, what you think about it. It doesn't matter if you're here or you're not here. 2 plus 2 always going to equal 4. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay. For Kierkegaard, those are those things are not true from an existential point of view. Once again, only those things we have control of, only when we have the ability to choose either or, okay, those things fall within the domain of truth. That was his take on epistemology. Quite an interesting take. So things that I we can disagree on, okay, then that's when the truth is possible. Now, how? How is truth possible? When you live it. That's another statement of Kierkegaard. Man, he wrote so many great things. He said once, uh, uh, a true idea is a lived idea. That's sort of his, in a nutshell, right? In one statement, one sentence, his definition of truth. A true idea, it's a lived idea. If it's really true, I have to see it. You have to embody it. Whatever it is you believe in, I have to see it in your behavior, your actions, your life. Because it's true. Many people believe one thing and they act otherwise, right? Don't be many people say lying is wrong, but they lie, right? So okay, so that's not true. When you say that lying is wrong and you lie, then you're lying. You're not sincere. It's only true when you live it. Okay, so that's his sort of, in a nutshell, his definition of truth, right? His understanding of truth. And he says here, truth is always going to be found in the minority, never in the majority. The majority will never be right. You will never find the truth in the majority. Okay, now look what he says in the next part of the quote. Now, when it becomes evident that the minority is stronger, okay, now when the majority realizes, oh, yeah, those guys, the minority group, they have something good there, right, that we can use, okay? When it becomes evident the minority is stronger, that they have a point, the majority will assume its position. They will steal their viewpoint, which now becomes that of the majority. In such case, truth will revert again to a new minority. Okay, I don't know what you can make of that, but it's a fascinating idea, fascinating statement to me. So, a minority, the truth, you're always going to find truth in a minority. But when the majority appropriates that truth and they make it their own, okay, now it's what the majority believes, well, now truth is going to revert to a new minority. So that stuff that the majority now upholds as true, that's not true anymore. It used to be true when it was held by a minority, maybe by an individual. But when it's possessed, adopted by a majority, okay, that's not true anymore. It ceases to be the truth. Wow. In other words, right? The majority will never, never be right. They will never tell you the truth. The truth can only be found within yourself. And if it's just you and the rest of the world, well, you're that minority, right? You're a minority if it's just you, if you're the only person disagreeing. Wow, I mean, if everybody believes one thing, and you're the only person in the world that believes differently, then you're the one who's right. Think about, think about Galileo. Think about how most people, everybody believed the planet was fixed and the sun revolved around the earth. And he looking, observing, taking measurements, he realized it's the other way. We revolve around the sun. And by simply making this public, this one individual, by simply expressing this idea, his observations, he was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. And that was a major penalty back then, right? And he was imprisoned. Now, who was right? The guy. Galileo was right. Now, does that mean that that's not true anymore? That it's not true that the planet Earth revolves around the sun? Okay, well, now that we know it for a fact, that falls within the realm of outside the realm of existence, let's say. Okay, now that it becomes some sort of 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? The fact that the Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way. So that's a 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's nothing now we can do about it. So, but for all the other things, uh, think about it. Think about it, right? One one person can be right, and everybody else got it wrong. I I am about this issue of science. I'm so concerned about what's going on because science has lost its, reputation of a discipline that was noble, that was beautiful, and now people are so suspicious about science because now and for many years there is a scientific community, right? And that means what, friends? You can't disagree with this scientific community. If you're a scientist and you disagree with this community, you're going to be in trouble. And you know what? Many people opened their eyes about this fact, this issue during the COVID pandemic. That do you remember? I'm sure you remember. That was not too long ago. That everybody was 2020. Everybody, all the scientists were on the same boat regarding the coronavirus and this and how the virus spreads and wearing the mask was the thing, right? All the scientific community agreed this is how you fight COVID, right? Wear a mask, and then you have to take the COVID shot, and the COVID shot is going to help you. It's going to help make this COVID this virus go away. There were some dissenting voices within the so-called scientific community. Scientists who they back then in 2020 they did not see any value in these two things. They saw that wearing a mask would not stop the spread of the virus, and they raised their voice, and they were silenced, and they were judged and condemned by the scientific community because everybody had to be on the same boat, right? For the good of the people, because of course everybody, the scientific community and the government, they were trying to save us from COVID, right? So they kept a lot of information to themselves, and they just spread some of the information that fitted their narrative, their view of the issue. Yeah, you gotta wear mask, double mask or triple mask. Turned out to be absolutely, completely ineffective. Scientists back then knew it, some scientists, but they were silenced. And now today we're dealing with this issue. Uh, Many people don't believe in science anymore. So, and I hope you see how this relates to Kierkegaard, to what Kierkegaard is saying right here. In this so-called scientific community or in science, where are the dissenting voices today? Can you think of a scientist who has some outrageous ideas, notions about reality, about nature? Where are those people? Because what Galileo claimed was pretty outrageous, was crazy. It was against religion. It was against everything, everybody. He was in prison. Where are the Galileos of our time? Because till, I would say, till the 1900s, the 20th century, we had the scientists were pretty open about disagreement and listening to other people's perspective. And I'm thinking especially about the early 20th century when physicists around the world, mostly Germans, they were trying to figure out the nature of reality, of the atom. They were trying to figure out electromagnetism, and then the idea of quantum mechanics, and everybody contributed, like all these great scientists, Einstein, right, probably the most prominent, and Planck and Bohr and so many others. Everybody had an outrageous idea that everybody else tried to reconcile, try to see how this outrageous idea could fit in with what everybody else knew. That's cool. That's the way you do science, right? It's a collaborative process, right? And in which you're open and you hear everybody what they have to say, even if what they say it's crazy, sounds crazy. Okay, let's stop for a moment and consider it. That was the attitude back then, but not anymore. Today in science, there must be consensus. Like every scientist has to be on the same boat. Well, that's what happens, friends, when you fall victim of the crowd. When the crowd takes possession of science, right? Now there is a community. Scientists are part of a community. What? And because it's a community, there is a very distinctive set of expectations and beliefs everybody else must conform to if you are to be considered a credible scientist. You must agree, comply with the community. And we lost it. We lost science. Well, I don't want to be that pessimistic. Maybe we'll bring it back to life, so to speak. But even in this domain of epistemological domain, a domain of truth and knowledge, like that, it was so important that we profited so much from science, right? Scientific knowledge. Now we have this issue. Now who's right? Kierkegaard will say the majority definitely is not right. We got to listen to individuals within the scientific community, individual scientists, or a minority of scientists. They are right, or they will probably be right, Kierkegaard would say. All right, before closing this fourth video, this fourth lesson, I should say, I want to offer this very brief summary. And at the same time, I want to address something that I mentioned in passing in the previous video, and that has to do with the relationship between the crowd and politics. So that's important to address, don't you think? Politics, always. So to summarize, we in this fourth lesson, we talked about the crowd, we defined it, and that's very important because Kierkegaard, who coined this term, right, the crowd, this concept, this category of existence, he wrote so much about the crowd, and he identified the crowd as his enemy, right? We talked about this in the first video, but he never actually defined it, right? He never put it in a statement, right? Okay, this is what the crowd is. This is what I mean by the crowd. So the definition offered is mine, and I say this with all due modesty. I've done my research. I've read pretty much everything Kierkegaard wrote about the crowd. So I think I have a quite appropriate understanding of what he means by that, right? By the crowd. And we defined it as the distinctive set of expectations, ideas, and values that identifies a particular group, and that all who are members of that group are expected to endorse and act on. Okay? If you're part of a group, okay, there are known set of expectations that you must conform to, right? Okay, we talked about that. That was the first idea. We also talked about collective ideas, narratives that have become extremely popular and are thus regarded as factual. Okay, so which, it should make you concerned, right? I mean, just looking at that statement, narratives that have become extremely popular and because of that are regarded as factual. Really? Like, simply because something is believed by the majority, that makes it true? No, my friends. I think you can see how wrong this sounds. It's true sometimes the majority happens to be right on certain things, but that's not always the case, right? We cannot make that deduction. Okay, simply because the majority says it's true, it's true. No. As a matter of fact, Kierkegaard, we talked about this right in the previous video. He would say the exact opposite. He would say something more radical, like majority will never be right. They will never have the truth. Only a minority. That's one of the ideas we covered. The sin of our age, according to Kierkegaard, right, is society's hatred towards the individual, right? The individual represents a threat to the group, to the community. So that's why you must conform, right, to the crowd. And that's why you must embrace these collective ideas and don't deviate from them. Don't question them. Take them as true. Remember, those collective ideas we mentioned and we talked about were the idea of secularism or materialism, right? The idea that there is no God, right? We talked about as a collective idea, we talked about social justice. That's a pretty popular collective idea right now that we have to do something, about the inequalities, economic inequalities between rich and poor, right? That's something we must do, okay? And climate change, the sexual liberation movement. These are things, collective ideas that you must embrace. And if you question them, okay, then watch out. Watch out. So that's the sin of our age, right? You cannot deviate from what the majority says, what the majority believes is true. So, okay. And if you have your own particular individual notions about society, about these collective ideas, and about what's expected of you, okay, man, they're going to go after you. We talked about communities, and this is where I want to talk about politics. But okay, we define communities simply as groups of people we share an experience, a background, or an interest with. That's it. That's all there is to communities. And I said this very emphatically. Don't believe in communities. Communities don't exist. They only exist in the abstract, in the mind, right? Conceptually. But they're not real, tangible things. So simply because you share an interest with a group of people, that does not make a community. But that's what people want you to believe. What kind of people? Politicians. Yes. Like I said, I mentioned this in passing, but why politicians? Because they capitalize on this idea of communities. They it's easier for them to manipulate people and mobilize people into voting in a certain way. So that's it. I mean, if you think about it, think about the communities, for example. Okay, if you are part of the white community, you're a white person, okay. Politicians say, or at least the idea is pretty much implied of being white. You must vote Republican, right? You're white. And if you're not white, you're black, Hispanic, you must vote Democrat, right? That's what politicians want us to believe. If you are, um, if you are a police officer, and therefore you are part of this community, right? Or if you are in the military, you're part of the community of people who are in the military, veterans and so on. Okay, then you must vote Republican, right? And if you are in the community of educators, okay, or artists, you must vote Democrat, right? So I said educators, thinking again of the unions, right? The teachers unions who invariably always, right? They always support the Democratic Party. So because that's kind of like what's expected of educators, right? We gotta vote Democrat, and so on. And there's so many other communities. So this idea, I firmly believe it's politicians who put it out there and they promote and they want people to believe, yeah, oh, if you're this, you're part of this community. If you're that, you're part of that community. And in that way, they can they can have an idea of who might vote for them and how to estimate, I don't know, elections, right, based on basic demographics, right? So it's convenient in so many ways, but but you don't have to fall for that. Actually, don't. Me being part of a community, what community? Hispanic immigrants? I'm sorry, I don't see any community. I don't. I see people who are immigrants like me. I see people who are Hispanic like me. I see people who are educators like me. I see people who have children like I do. I see people who enjoy uh, whatever, watching a good movie. I see people who enjoy a particular restaurant. I see people who cheer for a particular team, and that's what I see. But those are not communities. So don't expect me to vote in any way. I'm going to vote for the candidate that I think is the right one for me. For me. If I want to vote. Maybe I don't want to vote. In the past, I've done it. During election times, I have not vote. Sometimes I have, but not always. So that's the only point I wanted to make about communities and politics. We talked about Kierkegaard's conviction that truth is always found in a minority. Okay, I mentioned this already. So, but it's to me it's a mind-blowing idea. Mind-blowing idea. And the more I think about it, the more I agree with it. The more I agree with it. The rebels. I mean, you got to listen to crazy people. You got to listen to the rebels. People say things, outrageous things, right? And you got to listen to them. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're always right, but I'm saying just we got to pay attention to them because they might be onto something. So that's all. And from what insight, from the insight that, according to Kierkegaard, the truth will always be found in a minority, never in a majority. So what we need to be is suspicious of what most people do and say. That's what we must be suspicious, not the crazy, radical, outrageous, I don't know, different person. We have to listen to those and we have to be skeptical of the majority, right? And by skeptical, friends, I don't mean that you have to deny everything, the majority says. No, no, no. But listen, but take it with a grain of salt, just, if the majority say it, okay, be suspicious. And finally, we talked about existential truth, right? What Kierkegaard means by the truth, right? Something, a belief that becomes true for an individual when she commits to live after it. So remember that um, statement by Kierkegaard, that quote, a true idea, it's a lived idea. Yes. And so that's it. That's what it means. That's Kierkegaard's understanding of truth. So whatever things that don't have any, you don't have any voice on, for example, 2 plus 2 equals 4. We talked about this in the previous slide. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is always going to equal 4. Okay, there's no room for anything existentially speaking, right? So those things, that kind of knowledge falls outside of the existential domain, and the existential domain is our domain. It's where we live, right? It's our world, it's our life. So that should be of no concern to us. Things that are that objective or factual, like, are you really going to question 2 plus 2 equals 4? Okay, but it's more appropriate and more reasonable to question every other thing that can be true or it can be false. But for Kierkegaard, it's only going to be true if you adopt it and you live it, and it's manifested in your behavior, in your actions, your choices. Then it's true. So I hope this has been an interesting lesson. And I said at the start of the lesson that this was the very first topic that came into my head when I decided to put together these video lessons on modern existentialism. Um, I hope to see you continue watching, and I would love if you post a comment if you have any questions or something was not clear. Post a comment on the comment box. I'll be more than happy to answer. So having said that, I hope to see you again on the next lesson. Bye bye.